Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. I did a video in the past where I looked at how to use Kubernetes Cluster as Jenkins slave for Jenkins Build Jobs. I did that a while ago. I understand some of you are still having issues with it, so this is going to be an update of that video. Alright, so to start it, I'm going to create an Ubuntu instance on AWS. I'll call this Jenkins Kubernetes. And it's going to be an Ubuntu instance. So it's going to be Ubuntu 24.04. For the instance type, I'm going to use T3 medium so that you have enough memory and CPU for processing. So I'll use T3 medium. And then for the keeper, I'll create a new keeper. And I'll give it the exact same name as I gave the instance. Jenkins Kubernetes key, create keeper. That's already downloaded. I'll keep the network settings as default for now. For the storage, let's bump it up to 30 GB. Everything else will be default. Launch instance. So by now, instance should be up and running. Alright, so this is our Ubuntu instance. So I'm going to select this, copy the IP address, and then go to my terminal. I'm currently in my home directory, so I'll have to cd into the downloads directory where the keeper is. So before I SSH into the server, I need to change the permissions for the server. So I'm going to use chmod 600, and our keeper is Jenkins Kubernetes. So make this executable, and then use the command ssh-i, the keeper, Ubuntu at the IP address. Sign in, yes. Okay, so we are in the server now. Clear the screen. So our server is ready. So first things first, let's update it. So sudo apt update, apt upgrade at the same time. Press enter. That's done. Gonna clear the screen here. Next, gonna install Docker. So on my browser, I'll go to install Docker on Ubuntu. Like this. There are several ways of installing. I'm gonna use the apt repository, so I will copy these commands and run them on the terminal. Paste them here and run them. Yes. That's done. Next is to actually do the installation. Copy this. Paste this here. Press enter. Yes. That's done. So let's run hello world to see. But this is hello world with sudo. And you can clearly see hello from Docker. But we need to set it up such that if you run Docker, run hello world, it still works without the sudo. So you have to add some root privileges to a user. And for that, you scroll all the way down to post installation steps. First, create a group Docker. And this is already created, so you see it already exists. Next, add the user to the Docker group. That's done. At this point, you can restart your server, but you can also continue, especially if you have a Linux server. So I'm going to run new group Docker to activate it without restarting the virtual server. And now you can run Docker run hello world. It should give you the same output as the one we ran using sudo. Then one more thing, I will enable Docker start from boot of our server. So I'll copy this, run this here. So that's Docker run as a service. So anytime I turn on my server, Docker should start running. That's it for Docker. Let's clear the screen. So if I do Docker version, So you can see my Docker is installed correctly. Next, now because we want to do an integration between Jenkins and Kubernetes, I'm going to create a Minikube cluster as well. And for that, I'm going to use Minikube with a driver Docker. Okay, so that's the reason why I installed Docker. So for that, let's go to the browser, go to install Minikube, or Minikube install, go in here. And our system is a Linux instance, so select Linux, and this is the command for installing Minikube. So copy it, paste it here, and run it. And then you can do Minikube start. So the Minikube installation is done. So if I do Minikube status, Minikube is currently running. I want to be able to interact with the Kubernetes cluster using Kubectl. So I have to install that. So on our browser, go to install Kubectl on Ubuntu. Go in here for the links. Right, so I'm gonna copy these commands here and run them one by one. Copy this. Next, download the public key. And then let's add the apt repository. Copy and run this. Now we can update and install Kubectl. There are several ways you can do this, so either way is still fine. So that's done. You do Kubectl version clients, you see our version client right here. So at this point, if you do Kubectl get nodes, you see the number of nodes from our Minikube cluster, and it's a single control plane node. Also, if I do Docker PS, you see that Minikube is running as a container. And that's because when we did the installation for Minikube, it used Docker as its driver right here. For some information about our cluster, you can do Kubectl cluster/info. This is the URL for our Kubernetes cluster. So in case we need it, this is how to get it. You would also find out by running Docker network ls.minikube. When you create the instance, it runs on a network called Minikube, which is a bridged network. So that is important. And because I'm going to use a container for the Jenkins, I need to make sure that the Jenkins is equally running on this network so that the two containers can communicate with each other. Let's go ahead and create our Jenkins instance. Clear the screen first. Now, to run our Jenkins container, we will use this command. First, we are using the Jenkins LTS, the long-term support image. I'm calling this Jenkins Cube. Now we are exposing port 8080 for Jenkins UI and port 50,000 for any Jenkins agents that we may have. And then you mount volume for the Docker socket. And then this we mount volume for the binaries of our Docker installation as well. Then we will use the user root. We set Docker group ID as an environment variable. And you can see here we are putting this container on the network Minikube, which is the network of the Minikube Kubernetes cluster. Press enter, and this should start running. It's done, so let's do Docker PS. So you can see two containers here, one for Minikube, and the other one is for Jenkins. And they are both running on the same network. Now at this point, we will set up our Jenkins UI. Before I do that, I will clear the screen. So Docker PS is our container. Now when I do Docker, logs, Jenkins cube. These are the logs, the initial logs of our Jenkins server. And this is the initial password. Now, before I even use this, I'll go to my EC2 instance, to the security group. And make sure that port 8080 and port 8080 is for Jenkins UI. And then port 50,000 is for Jenkins agents. So all of them from my IP. This is for Jenkins agents. Save the rules. Can now go back. All right. At this point, you can copy the IP address. Go to your browser. Paste your IP :8080. So we need our initial password now, which is what we saw right here. Copy this. Remember, we use the command docker logs, the container name of Jenkins, to get that. Paste it in here and continue. Install suggested plugins. Now, this may take a while, so I'll pause the video. I'm going to use the username admin, password, fill it, call this admin icons, with an email address, save and continue. Save and finish. Start using Jenkins. Our Jenkins UI is ready. I'll go to manage Jenkins. Go to plugins. And I'll have to install some plugins. I'm going to install the plugin for Docker. This and Docker pipeline. And then the plugin for Kubernetes. This one. Install. That's installed. Go back to manage Jenkins. Go to tools. And scroll all the way down, add Docker. Let's call this Docker. And installation install automatically from docker.com. Apply and save. That's done. Because of the installation, I would go back to my terminal. Let's clear the screen here. Docker PS. And I'm gonna do a restart of our Docker container. So Docker restart Jenkins cube. Right, let's refresh this page. Sign in with your username and password. Okay, we're back in. Now at this point, go back to our dashboard. And then we are going to configure a cloud. Okay, so configure a cloud. This is going to be a new cloud. And I'll call this Kubernetes. It's of type Kubernetes, create. Now we need to fill in with information about our Kubernetes cluster. But for the URL, you do Kubectl on the terminal, cluster info. This is our URL for the Kubernetes cluster. Copy this and in here and paste that. The server certificate. Now the server certificate is the CA cert of the Kubernetes cluster, and that is usually located in the /.kube directory. You will find it inside this config file, which is actually the kube config file. Right. So I'm gonna cut the .kube config. And this is our CA cert. So I'm gonna try to get the contents of that. So I'll use cut the location, which is this that I just copied, and then I'll pipe it with base 64 encryption. Echo, and this is our server certificate. So highlight the whole thing, copy it. And in here, you can paste it. All right. For now, you can disable HTTPS certificate check. Kubernetes namespace. I want to isolate stuff in the cluster, so I'm going to create a new namespace. If I do kubectl get namespace, there is 4 namespaces here, all of them default namespaces. So I'm going to create a new one. So kubectl create namespace or ns, and I'll call the namespace Jenkins. Right. So when I run get namespaces again, this is our new namespace. So I'm going to use that as our Kubernetes namespace here. Okay. Agent Docker registry, can leave that as blank. Credentials. At the moment, there are no credentials. So in the past video, I did use the kubeconfig to configure the connection between the Jenkins server and the Kubernetes cluster. But that presents a lot of security issues. So in this video, I'm going to use the service account to configure the credentials instead. So before we do create a credential here on the terminal, still I'm going to clear the screen. Let's do kubectl get service account or SA. There's only one service account, which is the default one. Right. Now in our namespace Jenkins, still only the default one. So when I do kubectl create service account SA, and I'll call it the service account Jenkins, and I'm creating it inside the Jenkins namespace. Press enter, and that should create it. Right. Now when we get service accounts in the Jenkins namespace, you should see our new Jenkins service account created. When you do kubectl describe service accounts, our service account is Jenkins, and it's in the namespace Jenkins. You see that there is no token in this service account. Now this is because the new updates of Kubernetes that came out after the version 1.24, you have to create your own tokens and attach it to it. Before that, it would automatically generate the token. So for now, we have to create our own token, and that token is going to be our secret text for the Jenkins credential. In order to create the token, we're going to use RBAC role-based access control for Kubernetes in order to bind Jenkins to the Kubernetes cluster via the service account. So before creating the token, I'm going to create a cluster role. Now this cluster role will have admin access or admin privileges. That way we can interact with the Kubernetes cluster more effectively. So this is kubectl create cluster role binding, and we are creating the cluster role binding Jenkins binding, and the cluster role is cluster admin, right? And of course our service account is Jenkins, and it's inside the Jenkins namespace. Press enter, and that should create your cluster role binding. With that out of the way, we can go ahead and create our token using a simple command, kubectl create token. We are giving it the name Jenkins, and don't forget we are still working in the Jenkins namespace. Now when you create token and you don't specify the duration, it expires every hour, and so if you don't take care, you might think something is wrong with your pipeline or something is broken. But tokens in the new versions of Kubernetes expire every hour, so I'm setting my duration as 24 hours. That way I have the token valid for the whole day, right? Of course, you can change this if you want it for multiple days. Let's say 7 days, you can use 7D for that. So for now, we'll just keep it as 24H for 1 day or 24 hours. Press enter, and that should create our token. And this here is our token. Copy this, and this is going to be our secret text for our credential. So back on our Jenkins UI, click add Jenkins and select secret text, and then paste the token that we copied here, paste it here as a secret text. For the ID, let's call it service account Kubernetes token. Same as the description, add, and then we can select it here. Right. That's selected. Jenkins URL, that is just this address here. You can copy it from read. Paste this here. It's the same for the tunnel. The only difference is the tunnel is for the agents, so port 50,000. We have everything we need at this point, so you can text connection. Click test connection, and you would see that we are connected to Kubernetes version 1.31. So our connection is successful. I will leave the rest as default. So save this. All right, so we have one cloud, which is Kubernetes Cloud, and it's saved. Okay. Now let's go back into the cloud, which is our Kubernetes. You see pod templates. What we did earlier was for configurations, right? Let's configure some pod templates here. For the name, I'll give it CI agent. Don't forget our namespace is Jenkins. Leave the labels as it is. I'll leave all this as default. Go to containers, add container template. For a container template, because we are creating an agent for Jenkins or a slave for Jenkins, and so we need to use the Jenkins slave Docker image. And that is JNLP. Now this is the default name for the Jenkins slave Docker image to use, and so I'm just using that. Now for the Docker image, in the past, the Jenkins slave Docker image was Jenkins/slave. Okay, that was the image. Let's say colon latest, which is the tag. But this is deprecated, and so you need to use a different image that's available, but pretty much performs the same purpose as the slave that was used back then. Now the new image is inbound agent. So just Jenkins inbound -agent, and the tag is latest. So that is that. For the work directory, I'll keep it as Jenkins/agent. For the commands to run, I'll clear this. Don't want any commands here to run. Let's see if there are some other stuff we can fill in here. Okay, service account. Our service account is called Jenkins. That's it. So hit create. So you can see our pod template is created. Now let's go back to our dashboard. And then I'm going to create a job. But before I do that, I'll open up my terminal and open one more. Use a white background. CD to downloads directory, SSH-I, Jenkins, Kubernetes, Ubuntu. Our IP address is 3.90. Paste it here. Right, so we are logged into the server twice, one in the white terminal, the other in the black terminal. So I'm going to push the UI up a little bit. So if I do Kubectl, get nodes, so we are still on the same cluster. If I do Docker PS, these are the two containers for Docker, containers for Jenkins and Minikube. All right, so let me clear the screen. So what I would do is I would do Kubectl, get pods, in the namespace Jenkins. I'm basically going to monitor what happens inside of my cluster whenever I build a job in my Jenkins UI. And I will use --watch to monitor that. So press enter, and we'll keep this down here and see what happens whenever we build a job. So back to our Jenkins dashboard. Create a new item. Now call this Jenkins Cube. This is a freestyle project, so let's use FP freestyle. This is a Jenkins Kubernetes freestyle project. Go all the way down. Since it's freestyle, I'm not going to use Git. So go all the way down to build steps. Add a build step. And I'm going to run a simple shell command. Execute shell. The command I'll run is, let's say, get the host name. Right. That's it. Apply and save. I'm going to hit build now. So click build now. And you should see success. This is the host name. Now you will observe that when we did the build job here for the pipeline, nothing moved here. No pods were spin up because this used the system inbuilt executors. So let's go back to dashboard. Now you see build executed status. Click on this. This is what we want to use to build our jobs. So I'm gonna disable the default configure. And for the number of executors, I'll keep it at 0. And this is for the built-in node or the built-in executors. So save this. So any job will automatically route to our clouds, which is the Kubernetes cluster that we set up. This is our cloud we set up. Let's go to pod templates. This is our pod template. Now in here, I'm going to change this usage to use this node as much as possible. So I will select that. Everything else will remain the same. Save. Okay, let's go back and try one more time. Build now. So you can see down here, it went from pending to container creating to now it's running. And the name of the pod is going to be the pod templates name appended with some random hash, which in this case is TF9S4. So the container is running currently. So what I would do is go back to dashboard. This is our executor. Click on it. And when you go to logs or pod logs, you see that this is our container, right? That's a JNLP container. Go to events, and you see it assigned the Jenkins CI agent to Minikube, and then they pull the image for the Jenkins slave, which is inbound agent latest. Now, after successfully pulling the Docker image, it's created a container and started it, which is exactly what happened on the terminal here. I'm going to go back to dashboard. And then for the time being, I will stop this. Control C. I'm going to clear the screen. And the next job is going to be a pipeline job. You're still going to watch it. So go to new item. And this time, I'm going to create Jenkins Cube Freestyle Projects Pipeline. And I will choose pipeline. Okay. So this is Jenkins Kubernetes pipeline job. Go all the way down. And this is a pipeline job, so we have to find a script here. So paste this script. Now this is a simple script. You can also use Jenkins file to run this just by selecting it from SCM and checking out the code from GitHub. Right. Let's just run it here. So we have pipeline, we have agents. Now our agent is Kubernetes. Remember, this Kubernetes is from, open another page here. We go to manage Jenkins, go to clouds. This is the name that's referenced in the pipeline. That's Kubernetes. That's our agent. And then we have a YAML instruction here for a pod, and you use YAML with 3 ticks and then everything in between that. Now, by the way, you can see this is a pod. And we have multiple containers in here. We have a Maven container. We have a BusyBox container. We are giving it 2 trials. And then in the stages, we have a stage called Run Maven. At this stage, you're gonna spin up the container Maven, which is this name. It's actually the name we gave the Maven image. This is the name right here. Should be the same. So we'll call that container and verify the version of Maven. Do same for the BusyBox container, and this will run the binary for the BusyBox Docker image. Apply and save for now. Then I'll click build now. Now, as this builds, you see what's happening down here. This is the name we gave it, and it's appended by some random hash, right? So it's pending, and then it starts creating. And you can see now it's running. So it's successfully created the container. Now, an interesting thing about this actually is, let's go to configure. I'm sure everybody knows that a pod is the smallest element in a Kubernetes cluster. Even though in most instances, you run a single container inside a pod, but it's possible to run multiple containers inside a pod, which is why we have these containers all running inside this pod, right? And the pod is hosted on the Kubernetes agent. Then go back now. Let's go to the dashboard, or you can also click this to check the progress. This is the pod, right? You can see the name here is exact same as this. Now, as soon as it finishes running the process, it will go offline, which is why you see this is offline here. If you want to check the logs, you can click on this, and you should see logs coming from this container. Then go to the logs on the left side, or the pod logs. And these are the 3 containers. You see it's created 3. 2 of them were in the script, which is the Maven and BusyBox, and this is the GNLP image. If you click on events down here, you see the entire process. It first put the Maven's Docker image, and then created the Maven container. Then did same for BusyBox and started it before it actually put the Jenkins inbound agent container and started it. I'm going to use Control-C to exit this terminal, the white one. Now make this a little bigger. So I'll do Kubectl, get pods, namespace Jenkins. Right. So these are the 2 pods that we created for the 2 processes that we ran. Let's do Kubectl. Describe, let's say the first one. Namespace Jenkins. Sorry, I've got a keyword pod. Right. So this is the description of the CI agent job that we built earlier. And if you look at the events, you see it pulled the image started running it, you see where it created the container. You can do same for the other one. The only thing that's going to change is the name. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to copy. Copy this. Paste it in here. Press enter. And this is the logs or the description of the new container, of the new pod, which contains 3 containers. Scroll down, you should see all the information about it. And you see how Kubectl was spinning up all the 3 containers here. Right. This is how you would configure the integration between Jenkins and Kubernetes cluster, such that you use Kubernetes Pods as your Jenkins Build Agents. If you have any questions, comments, please leave it in the comment section below. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. And I will see you on the next one. Before you leave, don't forget to do a cleanup. Since we use an EC2 instance for this, make sure that your instance is terminated. Also, on the black terminal here, remember we used Docker for both Jenkins and Minikube, so make sure that you stop both containers for Minikube and Jenkins. So just copy and paste this here, press enter, do the same for the Jenkins, and that should be done. And after that, you can turn off your virtual server. Okay. Thanks once again, and I will see you on the next one.